Tiny Leaders, an all but forgotten format, lost to time. But why? Why was a format that was once so incredibly hyped and supported now just an empty shell of what it used to be? Why did people stop caring about it? And most importantly, can it come back? So, what is Tiny Leaders? Tiny Leaders is a singleton format comprised of 50 individual cards, including your general. The only exception of that rule is basic land. The highest converted mana cost of spells that you may play in this format can be no higher than 3. Each player starts with 25 life as opposed to 40 in Commander. The sideboard is limited to 10 cards and is meant to be played 1v1 in a best of 3 match, as opposed to Commander's multiplayer approach. And unlike Commander, there is no general damage rule. Tiny Leaders was founded in 2013 by Bramwell Tackaberry and Stephen Hamonic. The store, Game Night Games. The location, Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. Bramwell's initial idea for the format started from playing with the Singleton Legacy that contained pieces from his Carador Ghost Chieftain Commander deck. After spending many sleepless nights developing the then called Mini Commander, and after extensive collaboration with friends, his creation was complete. Throughout late 2014 and early 2015, the format exploded in popularity. Some state that the reason why was because of newer playable generals for color combinations that weren't previously available. Some say it was because Wizards themselves had begun talking about it publicly, and some say it was because it was something new and something fresh. But was it really? One of the main issues that the format had from the beginning was the converted mana cost restriction. In a casual format, players like to play with unique and interesting cards. Because players were limited to a much smaller card pool than what they were used to, that meant that they could only play with a certain set number of cards. Out of the 16,148 cards made throughout Magic's history, only 9,500 are legal to play in the Tiny Leaders format. As a result, people found that they got bored of playing it very quickly. Within weeks, the format had been solved, which meant that the best decks and strategies were identified, leaving almost no room left for creative and unique designs. Playing with the best cards from the Legacy format turned out to just turn Tiny Leaders into a much more sporadic version of Legacy itself. The format became incredibly stale and too barren to keep their players invested in. Why play a combination of Legacy and Commander when you could just play them separately? Another issue is the cost of entry into the format. As is a persistent problem with any format, the cost of playing can be quite a barrier for some people. Even if you only need to buy one copy of a card in such a relatively niche format, if there is a demand, then you'll more than likely have to pay much more for a card than you otherwise would. Take Order of White Clay from Shadowmoor as an example. Prior to the format, the price of the card was 80 cents. Once Tiny Leaders began to pick up in popularity, however, the card itself spiked up to almost $8 before settling down to just above $4. Even though the card is not considered playable outside of the format, it has still retained a value almost 4 times its pre-Tiny Leaders price as a result. Now, that's not to say that having relatively cheap cards becoming more expensive is the main reason why any format fails. If anything, this is one of the more common things that collectible card game players have to deal with. But considering that you already need to have relatively expensive Legacy playable cards for Tiny Leaders in the first place, the barrier to entry was already high enough. Having format-specific cards spike up in price completely deterred others from even wanting to play it in the first place. As of recording this video, the ban list of cards for the format has changed 5 times, once when the format was created in 2013, 4 times in 2014, and once in 2015. The most common complaint of the format is that it is broken, and that none of the format's creators are interested in maintaining the Tiny Leaders format themselves. With barely any ban list updates or extensive community interaction throughout 2015 and 2016, players felt like they were both left behind and completely forgotten about. Another large yet widely undiscussed issue with the ban list is how the creators used only one specific deck to test against cards that were being considered.
Well, one that is very obviously powerful is already banned, but the other ones also seem very format warping, and so there is a popular question as to why the rest of the sword cycle are not banned.
Yeah, we have been looking at those, and they've been on and off the testing list, and Sword of Fire and Ice was banned, and we unbanned it last year, and it's kind of everything bounces around with the swords. Everyone has an issue with them, and since they are equipment, there are drawbacks. So
yes.
Generally, I'll just say, okay, what's your problem with the sword? What's happening? Explain to me the game state that you had a hard time with. Now pit that game state against Esper Control and ask what happens when you go to equip the sword and they kill your guy out from underneath it. Yeah. Esper Control is our testing deck. Like, if we ever need to go and see if a card is bad or if it's good, we put it against Mariki Rebarrett Control, and if it doesn't ship out, then it's fine. You can beat that card.
So it sounds like you're using a single deck as kind of a baseline, but doesn't that actually discourage some deck types from being played? For example, if Sword of Fire and Ice is still banned, then that actually makes it somewhat harder for smaller creature decks to survive, because then they just keep getting shot with the sword, right? Like, there are decks that are admittedly a little higher on some control aspects, either because the deck is trying to do something in particular, or the colors just won't allow it, where it becomes really hard to keep creatures off the board, especially from a source of repeatable burn like that. Especially when the format is so small that most of the creatures are going to get burned regardless.
Well, the big thing with Tiny Leaders is the deck is so small, if you have an answer in your deck, or a sword, or a creature that they're equipping the sword to, you can probably get it in the game, or you can, really push for it. And the other solution that we came up with is using the best 2 out of 3 format. You have a sideboard. So if swords are a problem for your deck, and you're going up against someone with swords, you can put a Naturalize in your sideboard.
So your
So
your response is essentially play more answers.
Yeah, generally it's not always play more answers, but you can get away with bigger creatures, more answers, different deck. If swords are a problem, you can adapt your meta or your sideboard to deal with that.
But isn't that the definition of format warping? To the point where something is so powerful that you have to include answers to this particular problem, or you're just dead?
I would go with yes. But again, we've only been working with the ban list for just over a year, and it's still got a lot of kinks that we've got to work out. So
okay, so you mentioned that you've been working with the ban list for over a year. How?
Halfway into 2015, it seemed that the overall hype for the format had grinded to almost a complete halt. Among constant discussions in the Magic subreddit, Tapped Out, and other online communities, it was unanimously decided that the format itself was dead, with a large number of people wondering if it was even alive in the first place. In September of 2016, Stephen Homonic discussed a few subjects on the format's blogspot page. Bramwell Tackaberry had quit playing Magic altogether, and had admitted that he himself is very busy with schoolwork. Stephen then asked the incredibly small community to help him with solving the ban list, but with relatively nobody playing the format, there's not much input to gather from, much less having data to look at. While understandable, the update itself was too late. The Tiny Leaders subreddit is all but a ghost town, with very little interaction. How can you expect a community of players to provide information or experiences when the community itself is almost entirely gone? On November 11, 2016, Homonic released an update for the format regarding the new partner mechanic, which was introduced in the Commander 2016 product. The partner mechanic essentially made it so you had the ability to play with a 4-color commander, which wasn't available beforehand. Finally, some variety and vitality was able to find its way back into Tiny Leaders. Players weren't restricted to just playing with 1, 2, or 3 color combinations anymore. That is, until the mentioned update was released to the public. In the update, Stephen Homonic had stated, "Officially, we will support partner, but there will be a special rule implemented for Tiny Leaders. Partner commanders are only legal if their combined color identities are less than 4 total colors. This ensures the original ideology of the format stays intact, while allowing you to play with this new and interesting set of commanders." Understandably, the already minute community for the format was not happy with the news. 9 days later after the post was made, out of the 7 comments on the Reddit post, 0 were positive. Out of the 9 comments on the Facebook post, 0 were positive. The added restriction of playing an already dead format that's already riddled with inherent restrictions has done nothing positive for it in the slightest. So, in conclusion, Tiny Leaders is dead. It's questionable whether or not it was alive at all, and it's certain that it will never come back. Did it deserve this fate? Should it have become a pillar in the competitive Magic scene, or should it have never been started to begin with? While uncertain, Tiny Leaders has shown the gaming world how to not manage a format or how to foster its community as a whole.